As usual, each speaker has 20 minutes to present their paper, and then 10 minutes for questions and discussion with the audience, which means that if everything goes well, the session should be over around 1:15 Montreal time. That is, the whole duration should be a little bit more than 1 hour. Julie, I think we've got the 12 people who had confirmed their presence this morning. So maybe we can start. The first presentation will be by Shoshana Grosbar, and the second one by Victoria Vernon. Both are about, well, the two people are actually a team. They've been working together for some time, and their presentation, both their presentation are about law and demographic behavior in common law countries. So, Victoria, you may start now. I'm sorry, Shoshana, you may start now.
Thank you. Share screen. So can you see the screen well, or do?
Okay. The screen is great. You just need to put it in slideshow as a slideshow.
Okay, sure. Slideshow. So my talk today is about family laws that deal with personal property and non-marital fertility. The family laws I will consider, I need to minimize the pictures. The family laws I will consider today regulate, in one case, the control of married women over their personal assets. They were called coverture laws in the 19th century in the USA and I believe in many other English-speaking countries. And the second case is I'm going to be looking at the degree of community property in the laws that regulate marriage dissolution. And I'll be looking actually at two cases, not three. So in the first case, the outcome of interest is out of marriage mothers. And in the second case, it's out of couple mothers. Oh, sorry about that. In both studies that I will be reviewing, there is a comparison between a situation before and after a change in law, often while comparing the states or countries that experienced a change with those that did not experience a change. And in all two cases, sorry, initially I had three cases, but then I saw I wouldn't be able to fit that in 20 minutes. So in all two cases, it's about the predicted impact of a transition from either single to married or married to single on a woman's financial situation and on whether she is a mother outside marriage or out of couple. In the first case, I'll be looking at what happened before and after the abolition of coverture in the United States. And in the second case, the focus will be on what happened before and after community property rules were changed in one country and one province of Canada. The prediction is that women and men act rationally, even in this question of whether to have a child inside or outside of marriage or couple. and that the better a woman's financial situation, if she is in the married state or in couple versus unmarried, the more she will avoid unmarried motherhood or out of couple motherhood. So, of course, if you're going to look at it from the point of view of what these laws imply for men, chances are that if women are better off, men will be worse off. They may not benefit from these laws. Let's look more specifically at the first case, the case of laws abolishing coverture in the United States. This part of my presentation is based on joint research with Hazem Al-Sheikh Mubarak, who's finishing a PhD at UC Santa Barbara, and Richard Geddes at Cornell University. And our article was published last year in the Journal of Empirical Legal Studies, and it's called Single Motherhood and the Abolition of Coverture in the United States. So prior to 1850, coverture was the law in the United States of America. As a result, a married woman relinquished her property and her wages to her husband. Between 1850 and 1920, most states passed acts that expanded married women's rights. Some of these acts can be called the Married Women Earnings Acts because they gave married women the rights to their own earnings if they were employed in the market. And in the case of Married Women Property Acts, they obtained the right to own their own property. Some say that this is one of the greatest extensions of property rights in human history. So, why is this linked to marital and non-marital birth? Because under coverture, it was costly to women to be married if they had either some property on their own name, they would have to relinquish the property to their husband, or if they were earning an income in the labor force, they would have to pass this to their husband. So once these coverture laws were abolished, this was beneficial materially to married women, but there was no change occurring to the material benefits or costs of being a lone mother. So therefore, we predicted that as these acts were passed and coverture was abolished, there would be a lower likelihood that single women have a child. So the data we used were data on the law, on the passage of these laws, because each state in the United States was passing these laws at different times. And sometimes they passed both the Property Act and the Earnings Act at the same time, but sometimes at different times within the same state. And it's interesting, today is the elections in the United States, and a lot of people are annoyed with the federal system where each state has their own rules, etc. Well, as researchers, we really enjoy the fact that there are all these different laws passing in different states, gives us a chance to do interesting research. And we also use data at the state level based on the US decennial census summary reports. And finally, we used individual level data from the IPUMS, Integrated Public Use Microdata series. So that's from the IPUMS, we got the data on individual women who were either married and had a child under age 5 or unmarried and had a child under age 5. And we distinguished unmarried, also not divorced, and there were very few divorcees, but there were quite a few widows. So we also, separated the widows here. And Um, okay, so here are the findings. For all states, the main prediction that there was decoverture associated with a lower likelihood that single women have a child holds for the Property Act, but not the Earnings Act. In other words, when we use a sample of all states, we do find the prediction that as the law gave married women more rights to their own property, fewer women had children out of marriage. And in addition to that, when we just look at the states that had higher than average labor force participation, the passage of the Earnings Act was also associated with a lower likelihood that single women have a child. So the predictions were corroborated by the data. And also, we found that this only affected the US born women. Foreign born women didn't seem to respond to these changes of law. I'm now switching to the second case, which is about family legislation that establishes the rights to either community property or other arrangements in case of marriage dissolution. This part of my presentation is based on an article with Olivia Eckert-Jaffé, who's now retired from the INED, Institut National d'Études Démographiques. I get a chance to show you that my French isn't so bad. And this was published back in 2008 in the European Journal of Political Economy. In our study, we looked at 12 countries and 17 legal regimes because some of the countries or provinces changed regime. So we had some that we classified as low community property. This includes most of the Anglo-Saxon countries in our sample, New Zealand prior to 1976, the USA as a country not looking at separate states, Canada except Ontario after 1978 and excluding Quebec, and also Austria enters in this category. The next category is medium community property. This means that community property only applies to acquired assets. So these are assets acquired after the marriage. This applies to New Zealand after 1976, Quebec, Ontario after 1978, Germany, Flanders, which is part of Belgium, France, where I'm from, France, and Finland. Then we have the high community property regimes, Norway and Sweden, where community property typically applies to all property, even the one that was obtained prior to marriage. And then we have two countries, Italy and Spain, that in our sample that either had no divorce or then they passed divorce and they had acquired assets legislation. So again, the expectation is here we're looking not at out of marriage birth, but out of couple. And we're able to identify the marital status of a woman at the time of birth, which we were not able to do in the first case. But here we're using very good fertility data, and that's how we chose our sample. It was based on whether they had participated in the same fertility survey that gives us very detailed information over time for the same women. So the prediction is that as a country or province switched to community property regimes from a regime that was less generous to the typical woman who doesn't have much income from her own wages, we would see a lower likelihood that single women have a child, or that women have a child out of couple, more exactly.
5 minutes left.
Okay. Um, so the statistical analysis here is for 70 different legal regimes. And the most interesting finding is for New Zealand and the province of Ontario in Canada. Because when these two places switched from the English-based system to the community property system that's more common in continental Europe, fewer women had children out of marriage or even out of couple. And the finding was not as strong statistically for Ontario than it was for New Zealand. Um, these switches happened in the case of New Zealand in 1976 and in Ontario 1978. Furthermore, looking at the entire data set, we found that in the countries that have high levels of community property, namely the two Scandinavian countries in our sample, there were fewer out of couple birth, even though those countries have lots of non-marital birth. Typically, women are in couple at the time of birth. Conclusions now, I'm going to be concluding about both studies, that a woman is more likely to be an unmarried or out of couple mother in cases where she has fewer rights over her property while married or in the case of divorce. When laws make marriage more attractive to women, they appear to be less likely to have children either out of couple or out of marriage. And this makes sense from a woman's perspective because they have less to lose or more to gain compared to the alternative, which is to have a child alone or to be alone when they have a child. Now, what about men's incentives? They should matter too. And in both of those cases, the men would be less interested in uh, in having a child. Um, can I say something? Just uh, one more slide. That there is not just a benefit to the men and the women, but also to the taxpayers. And I guess still have a word to say to thank my teachers who started the New Home Economics in the 1960s and inspired me, Gary Becker and Jacob Mincer. Becker got the Nobel Prize in part for his models of behavior of the family, and the other one, Jacob Mincer, got the IZA prize, which is pretty prestigious. I just want to say that even though I was influenced by them and learned from them, my approach differs from theirs, for I recognize that men and women may have conflicting interests. Individuals are independent decision makers before couple formation, while in couple, and in case of dissolution of the couple. If you want to learn more about my approach to marriage, this is the book I originally published in '93, but it recently was reprinted by Routledge. And also this article, independent individual decision makers in household models. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Shoshana. It was a nice overview of your work on that topic. This is now the time for questions and comments from the other participants. The best way usually, at least in theory, is to use this feature that allows people to raise their hand virtually. This you can use from what is usually the right hand side of the window in Zoom. That's where and right now I don't see anyone, so maybe people are not very used with that feature. So if is there anyone who wants to make a comment? Okay, Mr. McKay was raising his hand in a more natural manner.
Yeah,
So,
I hadn't found the feature that says raise your hand. I know it must be there. I have few questions. One is, do you have information about how the relative effects change over time as women earn more, as women's earnings catch up with men's earnings? Maybe it's less sensitive to be a single mother. Then just a thought, in Quebec, of course, at this point, I think more women live in partnership with men without being married than are married. How do you expect that to affect the decision to have children?
Okay, well, thank you very much for these questions. They outside the realm of my own research, but I certainly agree with you that if you follow this line of reasoning, you could also apply it to try to understand fluctuations in non-marital or out of couple birth over time. I actually, at the beginning of my career, I did a piece of research on that, which was about the first baby boomers born right after World War II. In particular, between 1946 and 1960 or 62, not the whole baby boom usually is defined as 1946 to 1964. But if you just take the first baby boom women, they experienced a very unfavorable marriage market because on average, women marry older men, older by 2 or 3 years in countries like Canada or the United States or Western Europe. So what happened, since there were so few children born during World War II, or right in 1945 when the war ended, the women who were born right after the war faced a big shortage of men. And that particular situation, according to marriage market analysis based on Gary Becker and my own, it would cause a less favorable division of the output of marriage or the marital assets. Now, Becker mentioned that idea, but he never applied it to fertility. But in an article that I published in Journal of Marriage and the Family in 1981 with sociologist, the late sociologist David Hare, Heer, we showed that there was a big drop in there was a big increase in non-marital fertility for that generation, starting around 1965. So that coincides with the age, the arrival of this first baby boom generation, of which Hillary Clinton is one of the members. She was born in 1946, I believe. So this, once this generation of women reaches age 20, 21, you find an explosion in non-marital fertility. And that can be attributed to the possible benefits of getting married in view of the shortage of men, also just not enough men being available. So some women just, and I guess abortions were not so easy to obtain in those days also. So you have all these factors explaining the big boom in non-marital fertility in light of a similar approach. I see a question by Madeline Zavodny. Are there any other questions, or should I just, maybe she can ask her question?
well, there are two people right now, Madeleine, which I don't see actually, and Susanna Kamenagi. So maybe we may ask Madeleine to speak first and then Susanna. Okay, so there's nothing coming from Madeline. Okay, maybe now.
No, it's just me.
Oh, she has no mic. So her question, I guess I can look at the question and read it. Did these laws change assortative mating? And did women and maybe men too become less picky about who they would marry when these laws changed? Oh, that's a very interesting question that I never thought about enough to answer it well, but I would agree with you that these laws would also change assortative mating. But in terms of how I explain things, they would change the marriage market conditions, because any law that changes the rights of women or men once they're married will then also change the bargaining position of men and women in marriage. And also prior to marriage, this would change the relative prices of various kinds of men and women. And so I would phrase it in that way, but it will amount to also changes in who marries whom, in a sort, how they sort by education or income or age. I agree with that. Thank you.
Susanna?
Yes, thank you, Shoshana. I have a more methodological question, and that it's not just to Shoshana, but everyone who studies laws. And I always came up with this when I am the one studying it. Is since you didn't talk about in the revision about the methodological approach, is this thing about reversal effects, how laws affect behaviors and how behavior affect laws, and throughout the history, how this goes interchangeably. So how was the methodological approach to take in these studies, how the law have affected some behavior have affected the laws that was passing or just dropped later. And sometimes maybe it's nice for people who are not from the country know like a history line when things happen. So could you comment on the
Yes,
methodological?
well, that's a very good question. Thank you. Um, it certainly, if I ever have the opportunity, and I get enough data, I would like to see what happened right before and over time after the change in law in the cases of both the abolition of coverture and the changes in community property in New Zealand. It would be interesting to see whether I'm convinced that to some degree the change in law responded to changes in how people behaved, and that as it became very obvious that New Zealand stands out in the very high rate of non-marital birth and out of couple birth, then maybe that triggered part of the change in the law. So that would be interesting, and to see how long it takes for this effect to show, because it's in part because of man's reaction. They might say, well, we don't, if this is what marriage is about, and I'm going to have to give 50% of everything that's acquired in the marriage, then over time, I mean, immediately after the passage of the law, you may not see a lot of men saying, I don't want to get married. But over time, as it dawns on them that these laws can be detrimental to their financial situation if they're not so committed to the woman, they might be, decrease in marital birth because, for example, men react in that fashion. So it would be interesting to look at that. And the whole field of law and economics of marriage and divorce is not very developed. And so it certainly, if it can use more research using methodologies and other data. I hope that data sources, I hope it will happen. Thank you.
We might have 1 minute more for a comment or a question.
You have a question. Oh,
I'm sorry? Is there anyone who has an, okay, Mr. McKay, 1 minute.
He's mute.
Unmute your microphone, please.
Sorry, yes. In the province of Quebec, the rule was maintained that if you are living together but not married, there will be no sharing, unlike other provinces in Canada. And
No sharing of what?
Of assets at all. So I think that it was the owner of the Cirque du Soleil lived together for a long time with children with a Brazilian woman. At some point they split, and the courts then had to say, went up to the Supreme Court, that the woman was not entitled to any part of the assets.
I see.
Living together in itself. Now, is that good advice if you want to stimulate fertility? Because of course the province needs more young people.
Yeah. Well, thank you for pointing that out. I didn't know that. And that would certainly also make a difference.
Okay. We're out of time for the period of question. And so we are now moving to our second presentator, Victoria Vernon. We ran some tests before the beginning of the session. She had problem with her connection. So
still okay.
No, but I mean, don't be surprised. I'm talking to other people, actually. I'm speaking to the other people. Don't be surprised if we run into problems. We've planned that if she still has connection problems, she'll just use her microphone, not her camera, and Judy will provide the PowerPoint presentation. So we might lose a couple of minutes.
If I remove my camera, you won't be able to see my slides. Is that the case?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
If we are in a situation where your connection is really as bad as it was half an hour ago when we ran the tests, what will happen is that we will stick to your microphone, to your voice, and Julie will be broadcasting your
changing the slides. Okay.
PowerPoint, your slides.
All right. Okay, great. So let's get going. My main goal today is to get your advice and suggestions for how I should take this, where I should take the research to, or how to expand this research. This is a draft project, so it's kind of at the initial stages of development. The idea is to evaluate whether common law marriage, which is a law in the United States, should be abolished or universally recognized. And I'll tell you more about the law in a minute. Any comments are welcome. To understand the impact of the law, we might want to look at what's going on with marriages these days. Is that marriage is actually on the decline. We're looking at young adults ages 18 to 24, for example, and there are more cohabiting adults in that age group than married adults right now in the United States. And in the older age group, 25 to 34, we see rising cohabitation and declining marriage rates over time. So something is going on. We're looking at other indicators, and then fertility rate, which is the number of births per 1,000 women, has been going down. It's almost stabilized for a while, but the trend is downward. So people are having fewer children. Looking at on the right-hand side, a lot of children are born to unmarried parents. So in the world overall, in the United States, it's somewhere in the middle, but probably going up, just like was mentioned before. Another thing that's changing in this century is when people are asked, well, why do they get married in the first place? They give weird answers. And look at that. It's not for legal rights and benefits. It's not for financial stability. It's not for religious ceremony, not even for having children. They are married for weird reasons such as love and commitment and companionship, right? So going on. So in the United States, common law marriage is recognized in 9 states and DC. So they're marked in red on this picture. And they are technically all red states, right? Except Colorado, it's a Democratic state. So that's on my mind because of yesterday. Then we have several states that have relatively recently abolished this law. I'll tell you about the law in a second. So including very, very recently, last year, just over a year ago, South Carolina abolished the law. Then before it, Alabama, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Ohio, and Idaho. At some point in time in the previous century, most states in the United States had the common law marriage. So what that is a basically unsolemnized or non-solemnized marriage, where if you just say you're married, a couple presents itself a husband and wife without signing any legal paperwork, then they're considered married. So let's say the husband is employed and he can take to his human resource department an income tax return where both of them are filing jointly, and it will be considered a legal document. Based on the document, the wife is going to receive benefits, the same benefits as in other states. You would have to marriage license to present a marriage license for. So, and it is still going on in 9 states. So if you use if you use the same last name, if you have kids together, then you could kind of prove, if asked, you can prove that you have been married. But you could see how this could be contentious, right? So you could see how this could be abused. On the one hand side, I'll show you cases in a second, and on the other hand, it seems like the law that you Canadians were referring to in Quebec, where you are a cohabiting couple, and you may not be entitled to any property from your partner at dissolution. But this may be a law that could protect somebody like a cohabiting couple, and so the lower earning partner could receive property at dissolution, just like other states and Canada do. Is it a good thing? Well, maybe it is a good thing. It's not a good thing for the higher earning partner, but it could protect the lower earning partner and encourage specialization. So encourage in marital investment, relationship-specific investment within the couple. So, and yes, those are all the benefits, as we know from marriage and cohabitation. People make more longer-term decisions. They take care of children together, which entails better benefits for children. They end up with better outcomes in terms of health. So they face lower poverty risks and all that stuff. So couple formation is good. That's what this slide says. Couple formation is good. We want it. It benefits the society. Okay. So marriage is different from cohabitation in case that it provides, in the sense, to the extent that it provides asset protection for the lower earner at divorce and encourages higher specialization and everything else. So why common law marriage? So common law marriage is technically a costless marriage So it can be used by people who don't have money for a ceremony. And it was historically used by people who did not have access to a priest back in the 18th century, 19th century on the American frontier. They could just get married by claiming they're married. And so cost-free marriage. Another thing is that the trend is towards cost-free existence. So I haven't looked at how much, what are the average spending on marriages are going, whether they're going up or down, but they're going definitely down with COVID. And perhaps the trend is for the spending to go down and for the ceremonies to be less extravagant. So, okay, so the common law marriage is vague in the sense that it can be established based on living one day together and then claim you are married. It can be denied based on after 20 years of existence for a couple. Just somehow based on court decisions. It can be claimed by one partner unilaterally at dissolution. So in a sense, a couple can live together for 20 years and not considered to be married themselves. And then suddenly one of the partners might claim that the marriage existed and he or she is entitled to the assets. So there is a lot of legal advice on the internet for people residing in common law states. For example, one of the suggestions is for partners to sign papers that they are not married. So basically make it more concrete, make it more precise, define the relationship, right? Because sounds like it makes the marriage versus cohabitation difference too blurry to understand. But here's an example of a case online of a person who is involved in a litigation in Salt Lake City, and she was involved in multiple common law marriage cases before. So apparently people are taking advantage of the fact that they can claim marriage without marriage in a way. So in South Carolina, the law was abolished after based on the case of a married couple where they were lived together, had 2 children, and then I guess a wife may have had an affair, and the husband wanted to claim that the marriage existed so that assets are equitably divided. And then they have joint accounts, they own joint property, and then taxes were filed as single, and so the wife brought witnesses who testified that she never wanted to be married, and so the family court, however, ruled that common law marriage existed. And then they took it to the appeals, and that took more and more and more time and resources from the court system. And then the Supreme Court in the state ruled that marriage did not exist. So they overturned the decision. The husband did not get his property, and they abolished the common law marriage altogether in South Carolina. So what can you say? This is this kind of law is a nightmare for the courts. It's not like used on a massive scale. So, but there are cases. There may be up to 100 cases a year, based on at least one book that we've read, Shoshana and I, on common law marriage. So it is practiced, and the court is having nightmares over it. It's hard to rule one way or another because there are no definitive rules of what constitute the marriage. So based on that, the question becomes, should it be abolished? If it's such a big externality for the society, we have to look at the numbers. Like my question becomes, are there any positive outcomes that are linked, that are tied to common law marriage? And so I'm looking at a number of outcomes in common law marriage states versus other states. I'm looking at the rates of marriages and cohabitation, the odds that people are in marriages and cohabiting relationships. I'm looking at both state level data and individual data. I'm also looking at relationship specific investments by men and women, such as, do they work more? Do they share their paid work more or less? So more like a married couple who tend to specialize more, or more like a cohabiting couple tend to specialize less. So do they make cohabiting couples act more like a married couple, basically? Do they tend to own their homes at a higher rate? Do they have more children? And do they spend more time? That's kind of an investment too into their relationship, more time into chores, household production, and childcare. Okay, so these are average numbers from the Vital Statistics from 88 to 2018. So these are 31 years of data, shows that there is no quite clear relationship between marriage rates. It's not uniformly higher in common law states versus regular states. So these are official marriage rates. And I should stress that there is absolutely no data on common law marriages in the United States. So nobody keeps it. They are not registered, even though in some municipalities, it is advised that they be registered with a town hall somewhere. But there is no data. So we are looking only at the variation of states abolishing common laws at different times, and looking at whether it changes the outcomes, at least over time. So we're looking at fertility also. There's a spike, but I should say divorces first. Seems like there might be fewer divorces in common law marriage states. But who knows, maybe it's just a universal trend. There might be a little higher fertility, but also not clear. There might be a little bit higher teen births, but also not clear. Maybe some state-specific trends describe all this. So I looked at state level. No, this is not private data. Sorry, this is not private much. So these are OLS results with the state data. I had a mistake in the slide. So it's OLS results of marriage state level marriage rates and divorce rates with a simple regression with just state fixed effects. Then I added state characteristics such as share of population in the age group that's more likely to marry, 25 to 44, then average income by state, like just several state characteristics, unemployment rates that might also affect marriage rate or skew it one way or another. It's not even, it's not universally done in the literature. Some people just run their regressions with state fixed effects and state-specific linear trends. Some papers do quadratic trends, but that's not common. And then I also, in some specifications, include effects for those states that repealed the year right before the repeal, like leading up to the repeal, the year right after, and the second year after, because some changes take time to materialize. And as you see, that would be stars. If anything is significant, there are no stars on these coefficients. So there's actually basically no impact of on marriage and divorce rates, whether the state is common law, accepts common law marriage or not. Or
5 minutes left.
allows. Yeah, you can comment anytime. You can ask anytime based on this.
Okay, well,
Next. What, Julie?
5 minutes left.
Oh no, I'm just starting. So there's also on same regressions for fertility rates for women aged 15 to 44 and teen birth rates. See, what I have is there may be a little bit of effect on fertility. So basically it's lower by 3 people. The average is about 60 or women. So by 3 children per 1,000 women in common law marriage state. But also what we see is that when states repeal the law, it also temporarily drops over time. So may have been high a bit prior and then drops. So maybe same effect as Shoshana is finding, that people tend to have a slightly fewer children for a while. And then there is no significant effect on state level teen birth. Now, this is individual level data. These are probability regressions for whether a person is in couple, married, or cohabiting. What we see, and this is for men and for women, they technically should be the same because men marry women, but women tend to marry slightly higher men. And I'm only looking at young people, age 22 to 35. So this age group that marries the most. I could have expanded it, but there's already a lot of data. There's huge, tons of data. Look, 400,000 observations. What I see is there really significant effect on men's probability to be in a couple, to be married, and to be cohabiting, and less so for women. So some of the effect is explained by state-specific trends. So, but for men, it's pretty strong. What else do I see? There may be, so unemployment, no effect for women. Oh, here I want to specifically compare cohabiting and married. So no effect means that cohabiting couples in CLM states behave just like cohabiting couples in other states. Or for married couples or married women behave just like married women in other states. Even though on average, we see that cohabiting women are more likely to be employed. So that's for comparison. I'm presenting this coefficient. So see that really not a lot of significant effects on employment, even for men, just a little, barely significant. Nothing about the usual hours of work is the same. Share of work that the respondent does, the same as in other states. So basically no effect on the allocation of work. There are, however, significant effects on the probability of living in own house for women more so than for men. So they live in an own house rather than rented house. And no impact on children, on investing into children or having more children, nothing like that. So these are the last set of regressions for time use. So we're looking at chores, the amount of time spent in chores and care of adults, children, and pets, and for only parents, childcare. What I see is there's no impact on chores. For cohabiting versus married, spend the same time in chores. But there's some weird impact on nothing for women for chores when you add care, household production, but for men, suddenly they spend less time in care in common law marriage states, and less time in child care overall among parents and even among mothers, especially married mothers. So there's some negative effect is going on in terms of spending time with children mostly. So it's driven by children, especially for married individuals. Spend less time with their children, fathers and mothers. So what do we have? We have mostly negative effect. There's only one positive that could be considered socially beneficial effect, house ownership among married women. And all other effects are either questionable or negative. And that combined with the fact that it imposes externalities on the court systems, the marriage should be abolished. Okay, so it should be abolished. However, there are some some doubts, maybe my regressions, maybe my results are explained by some other laws, and the changes in common law marriage are correlated with changes in some other laws that I'm not including as a control, such as, you know, divorce property laws like custody, alimony, other property division laws. Or maybe, like Suzanne said earlier, the changes in laws are not exogenous, they're endogenous. They go hand in hand with societal changes overall. How does that play in this picture? I don't know, but I want to hear your suggestions. Like, what next should I do? Or what do you think?
Well, thank you for your presentation. It was extremely interesting. But what you're asking from the audience is a bit, well, it's not the usual kind of questions. If anyone has suggestions for Victoria, please raise your hand, real or
Write to me
virtual.
or somehow any form of shape. I like criticism and suggestions. That's what I like.
Okay, does anyone have a comment, suggestion, questions, or whatever? Okay. Many cameras are up, so obviously we can't see the real ends. And there's Susanna Kaminagi who rose her virtual hand. So Susanna.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Victoria. And I think you already said about the exogenous, endogenous stuff, so I won't go in that because it applies to everyone. It's really a challenge of data that we have and methodology to deal with. But I'm looking from the perspective of Latin America here. I'm Brazilian. And so my question and to you is not an answer how you should procedure, but I look at your paper and I look at the perspective of Latin American or Brazilian, where cohabitation or the stable union or the common law, whatever we can call, here gets confused. We have like a common law, but it's not a law. It's like a stable union, and cohabitation was so few, and now is increasing among the young people. And in the United States, you have this is the opposite. So my question is that if you put the question in perspective, when I look at your question, to me, it seems like, why do you want to see if this law has to be abolished or not, if it is a right to the people? If it is a common, or I mean, it's a decision a person would take, why we should abolish the law. Then when you start talking, and to me it seems like there is a lot of implications, jurisdictional implication or judicial implications of the law. So maybe then, yes, we should look at that. So my question is that, should we be looking at the demographic variables, the impacts of in children, in economics of people, or should we be looking at the side effects or non-good effects of this law on the taxpayers' pocket, or on the burden of the judges that has to be judging this? So is the question shouldn't go different. Should we abolish this law not because it does have or not implications on demographics or economics of the individual, but looking at the state? So do you understand where I go?
It discourages
If
people
I
from.
may, it's just a bit of background for you, Victoria, because I'm not sure Susanna made it clear enough. In Brazil, they've got a form of civil law, like in continental Europe. And until about 10 years ago, people living together were really legally completely unrelated, economically speaking. Unlike what common law marriage permits in the countries where, in the states where it exists. And about 10 years ago, in Brazil, they amended their civil code so that people living together without being married may have the same legal advantage or liabilities as married people, which is basically they invented their own form of common law marriage.
Mhm.
So that's the context of the Susanna's question. I'm trying to translate not from Portuguese to English, but from civil, Brazilian civil law to American common law. So now answer the question.
So they have there is a trend, yes, in many countries towards equalization of rights of cohabiting couple versus married couples,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's probably Brazil is one example. There is something going on in Australia to that same effect, and in Western Europe as well. And maybe that's the universal trend where the world is going. In that case, I mean, rights and responsibilities need to be defined more precisely. So if the law's common law marriage is to be universally adopted by all states, it should be a different law. So there is definitely a trend towards making marriage cheaper, and maybe soon marriage divorce, as I mentioned, the paper will be online. Just like a button, you are married or you're divorced, right? But as long as everything is rights, responsibilities, and the property division is clearly defined and cannot be claimed by one partner after. Actually, there's one case in which it might be beneficial for this leeway to exist, for one partner to claim marriage after death, is for older people. For in the United States, older people are they don't get married oftentimes because of their Social Security benefits may change and may be reduced due to marriage, but that means the surviving spouse is not protected asset-wise. So maybe it should exist for people over age 70 or so, that if your spouse dies, you can inherit exposed. You can posthumously considered to be married and inherit whatever wealth the spouse had. But for all other situations, it doesn't seem like a desirable outcome, right? In terms of, it discourages people from living together. So that's the main biggest drawback of that law. It plus the cost on the court system. So lower marriage rates, low cohabitation rates, and the cost it imposes, and with seemingly no benefits really. What
Yeah,
else?
you say it's a few people who use that. So
Yeah.
we don't know how this is going to progress. So this is from the culture. The North American culture is very different. But my doubt it is, if the law has to be changed, and it's in the beneficial of, even if it is few people, but in their rights, shouldn't the questions we as researchers are doing is that, what are these people, what they want, why they selected those, why they are in the common law marriage status and not got married. If it is something that they want, was free choice between two people, so why shouldn't the law be there for them? So this is my question: is if it is few people, can the research go and try to ask or do some survey with these people and try to get some non empir-
Okay, so
yeah,
what's going on too, I should add, is that supposedly people engage in opportunistic behavior based on the
Yeah.
incentives set by the law, in the sense that they, like in one situation, they claim to be married, in another claim to be unmarried, which is like totally convenient, I can imagine, right? So
mhm.
to pay lower taxes, you file separately, for example. To be eligible for spouse's benefits, you claim you're married. So in one situation you are, in one another. Should everybody has that choice, have that choice? I like that choice personally. I have to think it through, like how can the situation, what will the society look like if everybody can claim they're married in one case and in the other? I mean, maybe I've heard that marriage is should go because it is, like, as a concept, should go because it is the last form of slavery, right? So there are many opinions about marriage. And maybe that's the way to destroy it, basically, to like make it ambiguous.
Yeah, but the problem if you destroy this choice of not signing a paper, not signing a contract, that is the marriage, then or you end up with people who don't want to sign that, but have to sign just because other things in society are making you to do that choice. And although you wouldn't like to sign this contract with another person, a man or a woman.
For example, your grandmother, right?
Yeah.
Or your parents, who kind of who still have a little bit of influence on our choices, right? Our families. Yes, maybe all married, maybe well be what marriage should be is for people just to sign some kind of piece of paper between themselves, right? And that they are married, and like sign it every year, renew it every year. And then avoid all the service should be.
Well,
maybe
if it
that's
is a contract, maybe you shouldn't do that for life. But that is the divorce. So you sign a contract and then you don't want anymore. You have a divorce. So
If I may, I think your discussion is extremely interesting because no, I mean, there is a trend, as Victoria said, toward equalization of the rights and benefits and liabilities of marriage and unmarried cohabitation. There's a trend in many, and Ontario and Canada did it. All common law provinces in Canada did it. Quebec didn't. Brazil did it. You've got something like that, more or less, in Uruguay. Ireland did it. The UK did not. It's a trend. But at the same time, if you look at what people, not what lawmakers are trying to do or what advocacy groups try to impose to lawmakers, but if you look at what the choices of the people are, actually they are choosing more and more a form of living together that does not impose liabilities on them. So for instance, and this is very clear in countries like France or Italy, where, well, first, unmarried cohabitation is having a growing share. But among people who get married, more and more are choosing separation of property. And there are statistics about that. It's registered and you've got published statistics. So you've got those two trends that one is advocacy and lawmaking. The other one is what people are choosing, actually. And I'm not sure exactly where we will end up. But your discussion is really about that.
Yeah, for the future form of marriage, like, or where we're going, or why people making those choices. Given that companionship is more important now, your grandparents are really not influencing your decision
Oh, we're losing you, Victoria.
Oh.
Okay, you're back. Oops, you've been back for a second.
Maybe if you turn off your video.
Yes, that's the point. If we want to finish or conclude the discussion, maybe you should turn off your camera.
Okay, I turned off my camera and
And
I
we have
learned.
great sound.
You're
Yes.
back.
Yes, this picture is saying that you may not see the bottom of the bottom says a work is the great escape. No messy relationships, no dirty dishes, no nagging spouses. So, and people are saying, oh, I'll be at work at 8. On the other one is saying, oh no, I will be at 7. So I can work on Saturday and all that stuff.
Are there any other questions or comments? If not, well, thank you very much, Victoria. I cannot thank Shoshana because she had to leave.
I will thank you on your behalf.
Okay. Our next meeting is 2 weeks away, and you will receive a reminder from Julie. Thank everyone for being there. If you've got comments for Julie or I or myself between sessions, don't hesitate to send us an email. So we will have some kind of feedback between sessions. Bye.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.